Welcome to another episode of Raising Them Up,
our Christian parenting Q&A podcast, and we're your hosts.
I'm Israel Wayne.
And I'm Brook Wayne.
Welcome to another episode of the Raising Them Up podcast, where we deal with practical parenting questions. And in this episode, we are going to deal with several that I think will be relevant for many of our listeners. If you have questions that you want to submit, we would like to answer those in an upcoming episode of the podcast. Well, let's dive right into our content. What is the first question that we have from a listener?
Well, it's a long one related to siblings. And the mom wrote, I have questions about siblings. I have 3 children. The 2 oldest are boys, which we know about having some older boys, right? And they also share a room. My oldest is 9, and he's getting kind of interested in more focused play and less chaotic, like his little brother, who is 5. So they have to share a room. What do you do when siblings need a break from their other siblings? And what do you do with one sibling that just loves to antagonize the other? So it goes on a little bit and talks about the older one being bossy, leader. How do you deal with that? And then what do you do with fighting? For example, the older one gets mad immediately when the younger brother takes one of his toys or messes with his Legos and so forth. He yells at him to stop, and then just a second later goes right into hitting his brother out of frustration. So then the younger one comes to me crying, with the older one yelling out, I'm sorry, repeatedly. And it just turns into a lot of bunch of chaos, and I can't even get a word out to figure out what's going on. And I've told them to come to me if there is an issue, but even though I've said this to them, it doesn't happen very often. And especially then I've told them not to hit, and that continues. So that's a lot packed into one question, and maybe we'll even hit on some of these at other times. But what's your first thoughts there, Israel?
Well, I always look at the big picture. That's just how God has wired my brain, and we certainly do understand these dynamics. A lot of our listeners may not even know what our family demographics are, but we have 11 children. We have 5 sons and 6 daughters, and so our oldest is age 25, our youngest is 4, so we have a range there, and we certainly have seen pretty much everything within the parenting process. I think the first thing that I think about is that God places difficult people in our life from a very early age to help us see a couple of things. Number one, that we're not good. Mm-hmm. And number 2, that we need Jesus. And for those who have been listening to this podcast for any time, you're going to realize that it's kind of a recurring theme that we're going to go back to a lot, is that God loves us, and He doesn't want us to stay the way that He found us, which is the way we come into the world, very innately selfish, loving ourselves to the exclusion of others, putting ourselves first, stepping over other people to kind of get ourselves forward in life. That's just what we're like. We're hardwired that way. And so God very early puts people into our path to help us to realize that we're not like Jesus. We're not like the fruit of the Spirit. We're not peaceful and calm and patient and meek and gentle, and we don't have self-control and all those things that we would like to think that we do. We don't. And so these siblings that God places in our lives are very strategically placed there to help us to see our dependency on Him, to see how much we can't truly love other people apart from Him. So I think I would explain that to the children and help them to realize that this little brother that God has put into your life that annoys you and frustrates you, that is a challenge in your life, God has placed that brother there strategically, specifically. It's not an accident that he's there. And part of that is for you to, if you're a believer, to become more sanctified, to become more like Jesus. So the first thing that I would say is that God strategically placed that person there for you to learn how to love them and to be kind to them and to serve them and to die to yourself and to do all those things that Jesus wants us to do. And we can't do that in our own strength. We need Jesus to change our heart so that we can do that. So again, if you're familiar with our Raising Them Up book, we're pointing families back to the gospel. We point the parents to the gospel. We point the children to the gospel. We need Jesus, not just for our justification. We need Jesus for our sanctification as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can remember growing up with just the one sibling, my brother, but when he was 6 to 8, I thought he was just so annoying. I remember my mom saying that this process here of having a little brother and him doing things that you find, just annoying and all that is really going to help me to learn to get along with other people. And of course, I had a really easygoing brother in retrospect. And yeah, I realized that was helpful as a child to be told that by my mother. So that was something I think that made a difference in my life, being able to realize, okay, there's a purpose in this. And that growing up process is hard for a lot of youngsters. Yet we as parents really need to train them through this process. I think for moms, especially with our children, in and out, day after day, 24/7, all the time. And it's hard to get away from the aspect of expecting the good behavior and being shocked when it's not there, and yet just kind of stumbling through life. We wake up and we make the coffee and we get the children rolling on the things that we see necessary, and yet we're not actively, intentionally, proactively training them through how do you deal with these things. Now, again, this mom mentioned she's talked with her children, but I had a very Pollyanna view of training my children when I was young, where I just thought, I'm going to tell my children, be kind to one another. And somehow I was going to do this amazing, magical sort of trick in their hearts, and that they were going to come out being kind. And yeah, it's like Israel was saying, it's being rooted in the gospel to help our children understand their need for the Lord, but then also training them in it. I believe it's 1828 dictionary from Webster's says, to train is to direct and to narrow a path. And that's what we're doing for our children, realizing the path of response here to your little brother isn't blow up, to hit, to deal with it in your own way, your own fleshly way. It's not to act in anger. There is a narrowing way that we're going to help those little children walk in, even if they don't know Christ, to walk in that so that they learn right responses and right steps and how to get along. So in that, there's a lot more to say on that. And I like talking about sibling squabbling a lot. So we'll get into that in other issues. But I think for this one, I would like to focus on, as moms, it's so important that we spend as much time as possible, not just near our children, but actually being present with our children. And so for these two little boys, having them be in another room in the daytime is probably not going to work. So maybe having more time that is in the living spaces in the home, especially for the younger child, I think can really reduce some of that tension and friction.
And also having the older one be allowed to have some time alone.
Yes.
Because that older one does need some space to just be able to do his own thing without having little brother there constantly bothering him. And
that might be even scheduled into his day. Here's a half-hour slot. You get to go build your famous Lego towers that you like. And it's a time that he knows he can go, and the little brother isn't just going to come terrorize and wreck up what he's worked so hard on. So I think that can be super helpful. But also as moms, I find we respond to the problems happening instead of proactively teaching about it. And so I would encourage the mom here to actually take time and train your children in those right responses, as we mentioned, but also in realizing, take authority in the situation. And when the chaos is so loud and everybody's just yelling at each other, recognize you're contributing to that in a teaching fashion of yelling is not going to work either. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we encourage families to back up a bit, get a deep breath, and when the quiet has resumed, then go into some teaching time. There has to be consequences, or your words are going to continue to fall on deaf ears. So one more thought I had on this. Hebrews 12:11 talks to this issue where we as parents need to get in our hearts, what is it we're looking for in the consequences, the discipline? Hebrews 12:11 says, no discipline seems enjoyable at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it yields a harvest of righteousness and peace to those who have been trained by it. And I think that's something that's important for us to look to when we're talking with our children, when we're narrowing their pathway, when we're directing them, and even when we're disciplining them, is that there's supposed to be a yield of a harvest of righteousness and peace. And so as we're training our children, I would encourage you, look for those things as the things that are bearing fruit, that's showing that that teaching is effective in your home.
Okay, another question we received from a listener is,
so how do I handle media restrictions with older children? There are some good skills to develop on a computer, but are they worth the risk?
There are so many ways in which technology is creeping into our homes, and our family is no different than your family in the sense that we have teenagers, we have younger children. In fact, we have 4 teenagers currently living in our home. And so there's a lot of desire to access devices and so forth. And people always ask us, like, what do you recommend in terms of software or internet blockers or accountability software or those types of things? And what I would say is that we generally and generically recommend all of that. But in terms of specifics, I never like to give a name of a company and say, use this filter or use this tool, because really all of them are imperfect. And children are always going to be smarter than you when it comes to tech. And unfortunately, there's a workaround for almost everything. And so parents are often lulled into a false sense of security if they download some kind of a software app that's supposed to protect internet access or something. And so I always am nervous, because if you tell someone, hey, use this company or this product, and their child gets into something, then I don't want to get sued, right? So but I think the main thing is that we have to really teach our children from a heart standpoint about the dangers that are out there on the internet, and then also to speak to them just about what it is that is wooing their heart in terms of entertainment. And so oftentimes they want to be able to watch all of the latest movies and television shows or play the latest video games because all their friends are doing it. And yet sometimes the content of those deliveries, the content of that media is not something that is Christ honoring. And so we like to err on the side of caution with those things. We tend to limit not just screen time, but very carefully kind of filter what types of access we allow them to have. We use movieguide.org, which is a website that I respect. There are some others like Plugged In and so forth, but Movie Guide typically is approaching it more from a biblical worldview. I think, me personally, I find even more than Plugged In. And so they're trying to analyze not just how many curse words were in a movie or how much violence or sex scenes or something, but to get to what's the worldview that's being promoted through the movie as well, because that's very important. And so movieguide.org is a good resource. They also have an app that you can download to help you to make wise media decisions. So I think the biggest thing is, again, to have conversations with them about their desires and their heart, and what is it that they want to do, please themselves or please Christ? Are they trying to feed their flesh or feed their spirit? And to realize that as young adults, at some point, they're not going to live in your home, and they have to learn how to be self-governed,
right?
Because you're just not going to be able to follow them around and babysit them when they're 28. And so you need a way to be able to speak more to their heart than the actual issues. There are some practical things that we do with devices that kind of help. We use some programs that will set time limits per day. We also use programs that will lock down certain devices at a certain time. So at 10 o'clock, the device shuts off. You can't access it. I do recommend router-based blocking programs when those are available. They don't work with every router. But then also In the evenings, we try to round up as many devices as we can remember. And we usually store those in our bedroom at night so that they're not just floating around in the house overnight. Those are some practical things that we try to do. Our children usually access devices in the living room. We don't we don't allow them to use those devices in their bedrooms. We don't give smartphones to our children that are theirs, or internet-enabled devices that are theirs.
So the devices are Israel and mine, so that the children have to use our devices, and that helps a lot, so that we're having a bit of a check base with being able to check the history, and that the children aren't just saying, well, this is mine, you gave this to me, I can use this for however I want, or store in their bedroom. And that just keeps some accountability. Of course, it's not perfect, but it keeps some accountability.
We also don't allow our young people to have smartphones until they have a job where they need one and pay for it themselves. So we're not subsidizing them just owning a smartphone because all of their friends do. We do purchase dumb phones that just have phone and texting that we use because we want to be able to communicate with them. And so those are things that we will buy and provide them. So if our 13-year-old is at Bible quizzing and needs to get a hold of us, we want her to be able to do that. And so those are things that we will do. But we try to make the best decisions that we can. I think also you need to be realistic that at some point in the parenting process, your children will get into things on the internet that they shouldn't. They will be exposed to things. It's kind of the nature of the beast. And you have to have a plan for how you're going to respond to that and how you're going to react to that. And I think being aware ahead of time that probably is going to happen despite your best efforts, and then talking through as a couple, what will we do when that happens? Trying to avoid overreacting, but to speak to them with love and compassion, but also to help them to see their heart. And sometimes it is them getting caught in the act of sneaking or going around the rules or whatever that sometimes shows them their own heart. And they realize, like, what am I doing here? And they sometimes become aware of the fact that they're not good, right, and they need Jesus. And so sometimes that can even be a very redemptive moment if it's handled in a wise way by the parents.
I think one more thing I would say on that point is it's good to have not just accountability software, but also filtering software, because a lot of times the initial addictive nature for some pornography or something that's just not wholesome that our children can get into is very accidental. And if there's a filtering, at least puts that blocker up so that initial observation isn't made. So I think that's really helpful.
It limits it.
It limits it.
I always think of it like a library, where if you go to the library intent on finding inappropriate material, you're going to find it.
Right.
But what the filtering software does is it sort of virtually keeps the books from jumping off the shelf into your face, because that's what the internet can do with pop-up ads and that kind of thing. And so even finding internet browsers that limit the amount of ads that pop up, that there are ad pop-up blockers. There's a lot of things. We're not the experts. We're not IT people. Our children are smarter than we do when it comes to tech. And so, we're just parents. We are just exactly like you, trying to figure it out. But there's a guy that I know who works for the U.S. military in their IT department, and he is in the highest levels of cybersecurity. And he told me that his teenager got around his household system, which he thought was completely impenetrable. And so, we're all kind of in this together, but just realize that we need to speak more to the heart than hoping that our kids will just never be exposed to anything, because realistically, in this fallen world in which we live, the statistical likelihood is high that they will at some point stumble across something that's inappropriate.
So our next question is about sleeping in, and a mom wrote in asking, how do I encourage my young people, my teenagers and down, to wake up in the morning, especially when there's a Saturday or no obligations on that day. They want to just sleep and sleep till 10. The mom said she was a get up and go sort of person, and this is driving her nuts. You have any thoughts?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to remember is, particularly with teenagers actually do need a lot of sleep. They're growing and their bodies are changing, and it's very common for teenagers to need 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. And so we want to find every way that we can to accommodate that. I think one of the biggest problems that happens with teenagers is that they stay up too late. And so them having these nocturnal activities where they're up playing video games, or they're texting friends, or they're just talking among themselves as siblings, or whatever it is, watching TV late at night. Those kinds of things really throw off the next day. Mm-hmm. So what I always think toward is not so much how can we fight with them early in the morning when they're tired and cranky, but how can we back things up so that they're going to sleep earlier. So that's the first place that I tend to think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can see how allowing children a reasonable amount of time, backing that dinner time up, is the most important thing for us, so that we get the dishes hopefully thoroughly cleaned and everything ready before sending the children to bed. For young children, they always say having sleep cues is a very important thing for little children, the bath, and then Bible story or singing, or for us, we have midnight snack.
So you're saying like a routine that happens every night.
Yeah. We have midnight snack, which is at 8 p.m. Our young children don't know the difference yet, and I love it. But those little things help the younger children. And so I think we've had some issues sometimes with some older ones where they'll get into reading a book late at night and using that time that they think is just free time, of course. And then it's like that struggle of getting up early. As parents, I think it's really important that we kind of have a little bit of an antenna up to what are our children doing late at night, even though they might not be babies and not need you in the middle of the night kind of thing. Just realizing, do we have all the devices? I think that's a big one. Do we have all the devices locked down for the night? Are they all tucked hopefully in your bedroom, so that that's not a temptation for your young people? And then also just showing wisdom with them, helping guide them in wisdom to know you can't stay up all night and be productive. A lot of times it's harder for those young people to recognize the grumpy attitude they have in the morning. And they're like, well, it was worth it because I got to finish this novel, and I got to finally have some time to draw, or whatever it was they wanted to do. But just showing them there's so much wisdom in having a regular sleep pattern. I like sending my older ones articles about how important it is to get those hours before midnight and such. And they're with me on it. And I think some of them, as they get into their 20s, they finally see the light, because now with jobs and all, they're going, they want to get to bed early, and they value their sleep, and they don't want to go through life feeling so tired. So I think there's a lot of hope that you finally win in that department.
Yeah, and the bad attitudes aren't always just in the morning, but when they're tired, they carry that with them throughout the whole day. Mm-hmm. And then they're grumpy with their siblings, and they're hesitant to do their work because they're tired, can't focus on their studies. It just sets a bad precedent for the whole day. In terms of the practical aspects of getting them out of bed, obviously it's a little easier with small ones as opposed to the really big ones. But one of the things that I have done over the years is to keep a stereo in each bedroom and to wake them up with some energetic music in the morning. And I put the stereo on the opposite side of the room. So if they want to turn it off, they actually have to physically get up out of bed and walk across the room to turn the music off. And so that's something that I have done that sometimes is a little bit helpful. But usually, you just don't want to start the day with conflict with them. And so I find that if you're getting angry with your child and you're going back and forth, that's really not going to be productive for just your relational dynamic and the day. And so the time to discuss those things is later, when everybody is in a reasonable mood and say, this isn't working. And one thing that's helpful with teenagers is to throw it on them, and to say, okay, this is not working. You need to come up with a plan. What is your plan for how you're going to get to sleep earlier and how you're going to get up earlier? And so a lot of parents are always like writing to us and saying, how can I make my teenager get up, or how can I make them? Well, if you have a 16-year-old boy who's 6'3" and weighs 225 pounds, and you're a little 5'2" mom, you're not getting him out of bed. He's not going to get up until he wants to get up. So it's very difficult to make big teenagers do the things you want them to do. And so, you oftentimes will get farther if you throw it back to them and say, we want to prepare you for life, but this is not a good life pattern. It's not a good life habit that's going to make you successful and kind of get you where you want to go. And so the bigger picture is hopefully you're having conversations with that teenager about their future and where do they want to go in life. And so you're coming alongside of them kind of as a life coach, helping them to be able to achieve their goals, their desires, the things they want to do for their future, and explaining that, hey, I'm on your team. I'm trying to help you. And if you want to get to these goals, you're going to need to have a plan. And this is not working. So you need to strategize. You need to come up with a plan. And oftentimes they're much more willing to submit to a plan that they created as opposed to one that was imposed upon them. So I think that sometimes is a very helpful key as well, is to get them involved in problem solving their problems.
Right.
And putting them in the driver's seat of, I'm not going to tell you how you need to fix this. I'm just telling you that you need to fix it. You come up with a system that works, and if it works, it's great. I don't care so much how you get there as long as that you get there.
And I think another area I see is sometimes teens in particular are eager and excited about certain days of the week when they'll see their friends or have something exciting and fun to do. And yet the days that are just home, slugging away at their schoolwork and, for homeschoolers, and there's nothing fun planned, it can feel like, oh yeah, what's the worth of getting up? And younger children can have this too, of course, but I think it's seen a little bit more in the teenage years. And my theory is that it kind of indicates a little bit of God is shaping them and giving them a desire for something beyond your four walls later on in life. And so it's not like an all bad thing. And yet, of course, you're like, oh, but that's not real life. They need to be learning contentment. They need to be learning how to invest and produce in the life that they have right now, to build for that future, to learn, to grow, serve, discipleship, all of that stuff. And so that's like it's hard. You can't just call that out on your child because you might call it out wrong, but it's something maybe to be aware of in those conversations, to ask, drawing out questions for your child, your young person, that maybe help enlighten for themselves. Well, why am I so grumpy when I have a normal day at home and I just want to not even bother waking up to it? And then feed into them those things about life is not all about ourselves, and there's going to be time in their life where they will do other things outside of your home, but there will be times when they will be doing things outside of your home. But there's so much value in what you are training them in the here and now that will help prepare them. Then we as parents also need not to just be living for the times we get to go to something exciting, or when we go have the field trip with friends, and when we have those outings. Like, our life doesn't revolve around all the fun things in life. It revolves around the Lord. And that might be out and about with our friends, but also might be in the quietness of our home, doing the same thing day after day.
Well, we would love for you to visit our website that has lots of articles and great information on Christian parenting. It's called familyrenewal.org, familyrenewal.org. If you're interested in having us speak at your church or event, you can contact us through our speaker website, which is my name, israelwayne.com. And then again, if you have questions, you can email them to us here at raisingthemup@generations.org. All of my books are available through the generations.org web store. Visit their store, check out their resources, and you can search for my name, Israel Wayne, to be able to see a list of the books that are all sold through Generations. Until next time, thank you for listening.